Those who cannot remember the past may be condemned to repeat it, but those who cling to the past despite knowing its flaws are doomed to extinction. I'm Gwenelise Clayton, and I just now made that up. It's a paraphrase of that famous 1905 quote by George Santayana, whom I'm pretty sure nobody's heard of, but everyone knows the quote because everybody quotes it. Anyway, welcome to Rivervine, and today's episode discusses the topic of appeal to tradition, a logical fallacy that claims that something is important because it's established, habitual, or a treasured part of our past. This last Saturday, my husband Eddie and I visited Lindenwood Nature Preserve in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was a beautiful sunny day 1 week before the vernal equinox. I thought for sure the trees would be budding and we could get good pictures of the Midwest's first stirrings of spring. I was wrong. It's still very much winter here, at least as far as trying to identify trees goes. We followed the entire 1.5 miles of the Trail of Reflection and spent most of our time scrying in the pond, remembering how glorious it was last October when the leaves were in full color. As we continued along the trail, I checked out the trees and shrubs for signs of spring. My goal was to study the native vegetation so I could transliterate them into the Irish Ogham alphabet. The Ogham is an ancient Irish script where each letter corresponds to a tree. Now, not all trees that are indigenous to Ireland are indigenous to Indiana as well, but we can look at the genus and species as well as other identifying characteristics and make comparisons. According to what I have been told by neo-pagans, February 2nd, which is my birthday and the cross quarter between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox, is the holiday of Imbolc, or Emil in my Rivervine trilogy books. It's supposed to be, and I quote, the first stirrings of spring. So by March 13th, there should have been some sort of green stuff popping out of the ground. But no, not here at least. When you're trying to identify trees in winter, all you have to go on is bark and whatever leaves have held on through the numerous storms. Spring is when you can start seeing leaves and flowers, and from there's all kinds of identifying marks, which we'll probably get into in another video, but circling back to appeal to tradition. Life isn't the same here in modern day Indiana as it was in pre-Christian Ireland. And I'm not a 4th century druid. I'm a middle-aged hack in 2021 making a YouTube video trying to stare into the camera while simultaneously read the script on my computer screen. But just because I'm different doesn't mean I'm wrong. And it doesn't mean the past was infallible or somehow superior. As someone who has Irish genes, I'm curious about the original Celtic history, culture, and language that has been lost due to conquest by the Romans, Christians, and the British Empire. I'd like to learn the traditions of my ancestors and apply them to my life today. But how far back in my genealogy am I willing to go, and how accurate is the information available to me nowadays? The region I'm living in today was originally called Kekianga and was the capital of the Miami Nation and related Algonquin tribes. Because it's located at the convergence of 3 rivers, the Maumee, the St. Joseph's, and St. Mary's, it has a long tumultuous history of white settlers wanting the land because rivers were vital to trade, travel, and agriculture. And I have no idea what the history was before the French and British got here. But if I can get all woo-woo with you for a moment, just imagine the emotional imprint this area has. So much trauma, so many stories. It could very well be haunted, but we'll get into that another time as well. Let's get back to the appeal to tradition. I've decided not to do an Indiana Ogham after all. I'll definitely finish the Rivervine poem that I started last year because I already wrote about it in my book Zinfandel's Grimoire, and I promised my Patreon members a copy, but I don't feel the need to do a Hoosier version. There are enough ghosts here to teach me what I need to know to grow as a commodity. In the 18th century, Fort Wayne, or rather Kekianga, was a place where the Miamis allowed other tribes dislodged by white homesteaders to resettle. These included the Delaware, Shawnee, Great Lakes, and Algonquin tribes. By blood, I'm not related to any of these descendants, at least not according to my Ancestry.com results, but I can learn from those departed souls. They too faced erasure of their history, culture, and language, but their spiritual and emotional imprint is still here. And if we pay attention to what they have to say, we can learn from them. It isn't just pagan Americans that succumb to this fallacy. The biggest example of appeal to tradition is the claim that, quote, the United States is a Christian nation. Whenever I hear that, I immediately shudder because our country has changed so much since then. In the early days of this country, you couldn't vote or hold office unless you were a white, married, male church member who owned property. Today, anyone over age 18 can vote, and any native-born American over age 35 can be president. That includes women, blacks, Native Americans, non-Christians, LGBTQ people, and so on. No matter where you stand on these issues, you have to admit all of us are right here, right now, and none of us are going anywhere. Everyone's vote is equal, and everyone is subject to the same rules of society. Respect the individual, but protect the community. That means we must learn from history, and we must learn it in its entirety, not just what people in control want us to believe. We need to decide which traditions are worth keeping and which no longer serve a purpose. We must visualize a future that values each individual but ensures the safety and well-being of the community. We need to listen to all voices, not just the ones we agree with. We need to read, study, and change our minds as new information is presented to us. As we must seek the truth, even if it contradicts what we've held dear our entire lives. It's okay to admit when we're wrong. In fact, I've learned to just assume I'm wrong most of the time. I'm not afraid to change my mind or even my entire course in life. Most of all, I've learned that I need to stick to my virtues and values instead of blindly following the crowd. We are going through a fascinating time in human history. We're evolving. We're setting the agenda for the future. And I'm going to make sure it's my agenda, not Facebook's or Twitter's. It's hard not to be distracted by the news of the day, especially when it confirms the sounds coming from our own echo chambers. But we all need to take a good, honest look at who we are as individuals and what we value aside from trendy hashtags and how we can make our communities better places to live, work, play, and retire. Now that puts the burden on each of us as individuals, but it's kind of important. We're going to have to set realistic goals and recognize our own blind spots and allegiances. It's hard, but we can do it. We're going to have to, because if I could paraphrase one other famous quote, adapt, migrate, or die. It's not just for monkeys anymore. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the Rivervine YouTube channel. If you'd like exclusive content that dives deeper into the commodity paradigm, become a member of the Rivervine Patreon community at patreon.com/Rivervine. We'll see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m.